I am delighted today to be joined on Friday Live by Lee Pace. Lee is a friend of mine. He is a professional teacher, a professional educator, which is why I've been waiting until half term to actually be able to talk to him. Because of course, like during the daytime, normally he is off actually doing his day job, which is, as I say, educating people. And really, this is a conversation I've been looking forward to having for a very long time, because I work in the business to business professional training and development space, which means that most of my life is dedicated to helping my clients to achieve their learning outcomes. But I'm also very conscious that that space that I operate in is populated by a number of different philosophies, approaches, and some of which are more effective than others. So I thought I'd ask the difficult question, and I'm here to learn myself quite a lot, is what can people who work in the business to business training space actually learn from professional career educators, people who've really gone into this thing to the point where they really understand, I don't even know how to say it, whether it's pedagogy or pedagogy or, you know, whatever the correct phraseology here is. But anyway, that is what Lee is all about. So Lee, I've done a half-assed job there of introducing you. How about you introduce yourself in 60 to 90 seconds, because you'll do a much better job of it than me.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, I start by saying pedagogy. That's how I say it. So people say it different. Depends. I spoke to lots of people and they talk, and you know, they say it in different ways. For myself, I'm Lee, and I think I'm hoping most of you will know who I am from LinkedIn, because I'm on here a lot. Sometimes I have a week off, but I've been an educator or a career educator for 20 years now, and started when I was 26, and I'm now a deputy head teacher. I've been a deputy head teacher for 12 years, and my obsession is teaching and learning, curriculum, and training. And you know, I spend around 150 hours a year training adults as well. So I'm not completely wet around the ears, but I think it's nice that I come from quite a naive place as well, because I can just say how I feel. I'm also a specialist leader in education, which means I work in different schools with different teachers, mainly around pedagogy with the G sound, and also I do training for leadership. I train mentors. I train early careers teachers. So I do train lots and lots of adults, as well as thousands of children over the 20 years. And my job, my role within my school and within the multi-academy trust in which I work, is to support the CEO with our vision, really, for pedagogy and how we teach and how we want pupils to learn. Hopefully that's pretty much me.
Absolutely, and I think that beautifully encapsulates why it was that I wanted to have this conversation, and why it is I'm looking forward to it. I've got one learn from it already. How to say pedagogy, soft G. I've learned something, good stuff. So that's a big takeaway already. So I mean, I guess the next takeaway, and this is one which is a bit more of an open conversation. What even is pedagogy? I mean, why is it that actually all trainers, all educators, whatever space they're in, really ought to know a little bit more about this area?
When people ask me what is pedagogy, I always say it's the art of teaching and learning. Really, it's that kind of it's that relationship between what you already know and what you don't know, and it's kind of developing that relationship between the two. How do I get a person from not knowing something to knowing something, and even better if they can use it as well, so it isn't just stuck in that lesson, stuck in that space. But for me, that's pedagogy.
Excellent. So I know there's a number of different sort of educational theories, a number of which will fall into different sort of areas within pedagogy. But I mean, looking at it, I know you and I have talked about Bloom's taxonomy previously, which for me is a beautiful illustration of I suppose the process of learning, which you know obviously goes at different paces for different people, and indeed for different subjects, even within the same person. But do you want to just give us a quick high-level overview of what that is? Because I think that's quite a helpful framework to talk about straight away.
Yeah, Bloom's taxonomy was developed by Benjamin Bloom in 1951, I think, because it was the 50s. So it's an old one, and it stayed quite true. It's been used, rehashed, rewritten over the years, but fundamentally it's a hierarchy. I mean, I don't sell it as a hierarchy, but it's a sequence of different approaches to how we remember things, really. So you go from Now, what's the capital of France? It's Paris. You just know it. It's either you know it or we don't. Going all the way up to creating something where you need lots and lots of knowledge so that you can create it. Within there, there's analysing, so looking at 2 or 3 different aspects of your role, or if it was maths, 2 or 3 parts of maths, and seeing which ones come out on top. And they would be evaluating then as well. So it's all the different perspectives that you might just take one single objective. So for me, the objective might be to find a quantity of a fraction of a quantity. So what's 3/7 of 49? And there's a simple answer. Being able to describe that answer, being able to come up with 2 different ways to show the answer is a high level skill, I would say. So to me, Bloom's is great for designing learning. But then that's where I see it as its primary function, really.
I must admit, in my own world, it's exactly how we work. So for example, within our sales training, we do sales training, we do management training, we do all kinds of things. But within our sales training, we do like a foundational unit, which is really aimed at the sort of basic levels of the taxonomy. And it is more of a taxonomy than a hierarchy. But looking at those lower levels within the taxonomy, you're looking at the basic ability to recall things, like you say. What is the capital of France? Or in our world, it'd be lots of other things around, what are the stages of an upfront contract, things like that. And then really around a certain level of understanding of that concept, and then a certain level of application of it. So when they walk away from the foundational stuff, they've got the basics. But then as they go into the next phase, which is what we call our mastery phase, that's where you move into the next part of the taxonomy, which is where they've got, as you say, the analysis, the evaluation, and then ultimately the synthesis, where they create their own new areas. And this is a lovely phrase, which I know is a quotation, but I first heard it from you, which is that neurons that fire together wire together. And I really love that. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about what that process looks like from a learning point of view? Because I know this is something you've looked at in a great deal of depth.
Yeah, I mean, one of the theories that I'm really quite obsessed with is cognitive load theory. And I think when people always think about cognitive load theory, they just say, don't overload the working memory, which in some aspects is true. But when we're talking about overloading working memory, we're only talking about novel information, new information. If you've already learned something, your working memory will work with masses and masses of information if you already know it. But there's so much that have come out of cognitive load, and it's well worth watching a few videos on YouTube. It's Professor John Swaller, who incidentally is amazing, because I do email him quite often and badger him, and only yesterday he got back to on a point that I was asking, and he's based in Sydney, New South Wales. It's incredible, but some of the ideas that come out of it challenge me and how I design learning. So, for example, we all use PowerPoint, don't we? We all use PowerPoint. So, and I think, PowerPoint in itself, there's nothing wrong with PowerPoint, but I think it's just how it's used. So, first example for me would, you've done a training session, you've worked really hard in designing this training session. It's always going to be about 50 slides, isn't it? The question you should be asking, what does slide 29 do? And how is it useful for your delegates and their company? Where does that fit in the sequence of slides? So has it been planned as a sequence? Because, or does the information just become, Professor John Swaller will call it just transient, just passing through. So it's just like the old in one ear and out the other. So that's just one aspect of it, to think, right, I've got this PowerPoint. Because I think PowerPoints are quite useful for the trainer, keep on track and to help design, but I was recently on a course, a mental health first aid course, and back in very recently, June, and it was around 50 to 60 slides covered in text and diagrams, and I'm still not quite sure what I got out of it. It's such a serious matter at the moment. It's so important to my role that worries me when every slide might have had 200-300 words on it.
Oh, man.
And if you've got 50 slides, you're getting up to a lot of words. I'm a mathematician, but it's a lot of words in the thousands. So
I mean, they call it death by PowerPoint, don't they? I think they should rechristen that. I think they should call it murder by PowerPoint, because it's done with malice aforethought. It's not good. And really, I think it should be some form of crime, because it's that you just hit the nail on the head when you said it's great for the trainer, but it's not about the trainer. I mean, whose learning outcomes are these? You know, it's certainly not the trainer's learning outcomes. If it becomes about the trainer on broadcast mode, well, frankly, that is not delivering training.
No,
that is frankly self-pleasuring and liking the sound of your own voice too much. And I'm not sort of saying that was the case with the trainer there. They might have just not known any better, but oh my goodness me, that is not good.
Yeah, I think what further compounded it was definitely off the shelf training. So it's a package that they take around. I'm fully aware that times are premium, isn't it? You can't keep redesigning training all the time. But it wasn't for that audience. It wasn't for me. They didn't know what I already knew. There's no talk, nothing to prepare me for it. So
I guess what I would say there is, if time's at a premium, and it's our one non-renewable resource, it's ultimately finite. We've only got an X number of days on this planet. Then how dare we ever waste people's time? Because that is a waste of people's time. That's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, half a day, God forbid, they're never going to get back.
No,
not at all. And to that point, I mean, I guess, is there ever a scenario in which, like, a one and done sheep dip, it's all the same for everybody, straight off a conveyor belt, you're getting the same thing, you dipped into it, great, congratulations, go out into the wild, you've been trained. Is there ever a scenario in which that works?
No, I don't think there is. And the reason is because every single delegate, as in every single pupil, is different. They're all going to be different. So, and if it's just that, like you decide it's a sheep dip, where does it go after that? What happens to it as it just gets lost?
Absolutely.
And I think there is some design principles you can do. So, I mean, when I don't use PowerPoint, I use something called Explain Everything. It's just on an app. So I kind of build the slides with my audience. And I suppose because I know my audience so well, these children I spend at least 4 hours a week with, it's a little easier for me. But I think there's a few things where you can create a presentation that can be bespoke, but you don't have to keep changing the presentation. And I think that's what I would do then, is using things like imagery. So things like symbols. And again, this comes from cognitive load, so diagrams and text. And a little tip here, if you're using diagrams and text, if you can put the text inside the diagram, that frees up a lot of space cognitively for you to think. So they haven't got to look at two different areas. So they haven't got to look on the left at the diagram, and they don't have to look at the right for the labels. Try and, wherever possible, merge them together. If you can. Because what they do, call it split attention. So I've got one attention on the visual, one attention on the vocabulary, and quite possibly a trainer reading over all of it. So, and another big tip I would say is, when you've got something on a PowerPoint, let the delegates read it. Don't read it to them. And that's really hard, but I do that in teaching now, and it makes a big difference, because when you're reading it to them and they're trying to read it, again, you get a split attention. They're trying to read that and they're trying to listen to you. And we can't do both at the same time very well.
Yes.
One of the biggest changes we've done in my school, not across yet, is when we have a class text, traditionally the teacher would read and every single pupil would have a book and follow the text. And I said, no, you just read. You just listen. And then where there's complicated words, stop and explain. But if they're trying to read and also listen to you, we get that split attention.
That's a really good point. There's a great book called How to Be a Productivity Ninja by a guy called Graham Alcott, and he makes the point in there that attention is a currency. We pay it, and we can only pay attention to one thing at a time. Certainly in terms of our proactive attention, we can only focus on one thing at a time. The myth of multitasking, you can't. What you're doing there is you're flipping your attention back and forth between two things very quickly, which means you're going to miss stuff. So even if you're really good at it, you will miss stuff. So if you want proactive attention, focus on one thing only. So the word priority didn't have a plural until the Industrial Revolution. It only existed as a singular.
Right.
Prior means prior or before or one thing. That's literally what the prefix means. So yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, to this point, you're talking about, you know, PowerPoint. You're talking about different sorts of learning interventions. How important is it within any kind of educational scenario to kind of mix the interventions up so that people are kind of keeping fresh, they're keeping engaged, and they're seeing lots of different things, and they're keeping it, I suppose, you know, keeping engaged through the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, engagement. So I think the first thing with engagement is don't confuse with entertainment, because again, the entertainment can take your attention somewhere else. You know, I mean, we've been through that in education. We're out the other end. Fingers crossed that we want the pupils to enjoy. We want the pupils to enjoy the learning, and hopefully delegates to enjoy their learning. But I think it's a bit patronising when we try to entertain. In terms of engagement, yeah, I think having that variety, and again, going back to the PowerPoint, it's almost like we don't believe anybody can actually listen to us verbally anymore. So what happened? Why does everything need to be on the slide? Why can't we just say it?
Absolutely.
So that's important. It's like we've forgotten, and actually humans haven't forgotten. They haven't forgotten at all. And also on, you know, just the use of an image, and then you can talk. The research says you can talk over the image. Our mind can cope with both. You can't talk over text. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that there's some research by Doug Lemoff. He's an educator.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about no opt-out. And I've done it before. I used to sell washers many years ago. And we go on training. We love the training because the bar was open at night. So we can sit there all day, do practically nothing, and then go and get drunk. It is amazing. I know I was only 21. I don't do that now, of course. But it's because I was able to opt out. I could just have a day off. So how do you engage them opting out? So in my classes, the first thing the pupils do is that, you know, I can impact these routines. As they come in, they've got just two drawers. They pick up a whiteboard. They pick up a whiteboard pen. So every time I'm asking a question, every single one of them gives an answer.
Nice.
Now some people might think that's a bit babies, but actually I think that could work. I don't see an issue with adults having a whiteboard and a pen, because it gives you two things really. None of them opt out, and when you're asking them to speak, they get a chance to rehearse what they're speaking.
Yeah.
It's that anxiety in training as well. People get really, if they're asked to speak, they get really anxious. So they get that rehearsal time as well.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that point, but yes, spot on. It's that way of kind of, I suppose, rehearse it in your head before it comes out of your mouth. And
yeah, definitely. You don't go and watch the pantomime. It's not their first show, is it?
No.
It's not rehearsing that. So, you know, give your delegates a chance to rehearse some of their responses. That might be a short presentation as well.
Yeah, it really could be. And
I've done it, Matthew, where we say, right, who's giving feedback on table 1? And they're all looking at each other. If that's decided beforehand and they have a chance to work together, it lowers the anxiety straight away, and you get much better thinking, because anxiety in itself, it will load your working memory.
Absolutely. You end up with a fight or flight, basically. So you end up not being able to think.
Yeah, I'm sure you've mentioned the amygdala before, the back of the head. It's like your soldier in your head, and that's what will be driving everything in that training, that anxiety. Absolutely. And I can't remember the name. Somebody on the LinkedIn this morning said, "Don't say role play." Now I don't like to dismiss role play as an activity. Nobody seems to like it. I think because when you talk about prior learning, you talk about real things that have happened, haven't you? Like you say, you can really connect with them. Role play, no matter how you do, you know, it's pretend. But in my experience, one thing I've never seen a trainer do is to model it. You want me to role play, so you model it to me first, so I know what it looks like. And I think if I was to say there's anything missing from when I've been on training, both when I was selling washing machines and hi-fis, and a lot of that, the coaching training, leadership training I do, not enough is modeled to me. Show me how it is. Show me what you want from me, and I can go away and practice. And there's a good bit of research. It's Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction. Talks a lot about modeling. until they're comfortable to be independent. Because you ultimately want to be independent, whether it's a 5-year-old or a 55-year-old. You want to go away and be confident enough to do it. So, there's such a few ways, really. The last way I'll mention is the idea of a story, telling a story that links to the learning. It might be an analogy, it might be your prior experience. And I know I've sent you this video about 3 times. And every time I send it, I think it's the first time I sent it. I'm obsessed with physics and Professor Brian Cox.
Yeah.
And one theory that fascinates is the second law of thermodynamics, which I know very little about. But he described it using a sandcastle, and it's just a piece of genius.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean I understand that second law of thermodynamics, but it gives me a hook. It gives me an anchor and a starting point on which I can hang some of my thoughts.
Yes, absolutely. And it's beautifully explained. And yes, you have sent it to me a few times. I really love it. Explaining things with metaphor, speaking to that more creative part of our brain, the limbic part of our brain, where we can kind of form all those kind of unusual connections. And when you learn something new, connecting in that way is really helpful, because it paints pictures, and it also gives us other sorts of senses engaged with this thing. So the idea that everything tends towards entropy, which is your second law of thermodynamics, so everything tends to degrade to simpler forms, illustrated with a lovely sandcastle in the desert. It was excellent. It's beautiful. So really, really good. But I'm intrigued by a couple of things that you said there, and really this sort of speaks to a lot of the stuff that I've really been exercising my brain over the course of the last few years, as we've sort of tried to get better and better at what we do. And part of our vision is to deliver all of our training, whether it's online or offline or whatever, at the absolute pinnacle of what it can be in order to deliver those learning outcomes. And modeling is actually something that we've been working on quite a lot. And I'm so pleased you just said that, because I literally yesterday morning in one of our mastery classes, we get feedback from our delegates after every single session, so we can keep on improving. And the overwhelming feedback, it was a practical session where we did lots of, well, let's not call it role play, because we don't want to offend the person that's quoting.
No, I'm sure you won't be offended.
Let's call it skills practice. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just people don't mind skills practice, whereas they hate role play, even though it's the same thing. But basically, we did quite a lot of that, and the overwhelming feedback was just, we want more of this. We want more of this, because a lot of it was basically model it. Let's look at what it looks like. Let's practice it, because professionals always practice in private. They can perfect it in public, but let's practice it in private. So absolutely fantastic stuff. We've talked previously about sort of curriculum design and things. Talk me through a little bit about how you would go about designing a curriculum.
I always start with, always do the Simon Sinek and start with why. So what is it we want from our curriculum? And in my school, we have a curriculum promise that does, talks about high academic standards. That's not the priority or priorities, but we talk about keeping safe, particularly online. So, that's been consulted with all the staff. And then how does that run all the way through the subjects? So each subject will have its own headline. So history will be, our history headline is to learn from the past, that kind of thing. Nice. So how does that link into academic standards, giving people a sense of well-being? So that's where we start. We don't start with the content. We start with the big idea. What do we want for our pupils? And I suppose in your world, it's what do you want for your delegates, or what do the company want for those delegates? It's where does it fit? And that's where we start. That is the start. And that took us from that starting point until now. That's been about 3 years. And we're still refining an awful lot. And then we might take each subject, and we might, we call them intent statements. It's a bit offsteady, that is really, but it's the why statements. That's what it says on there. And then we start at year 5. So, for example, art. What are they learning in year 5 that will support this promise? What will support their academic progress, and why? So, what are the big ideas on art? What are the big concepts? Let's break them down and see what it looks like as a sequence all the way up to year 8 as well, when they leave us. So it's like, so we start in year 5 with line and tone. We start with real basics. So I think when we're designing a a course or a piece of CPD and pull out what are the two big concepts that you really want to focus on? What are the two most important things on here? Like a tree, really, spreading out. And okay, how will I get that concept? I can remember, it's just popped in my head, I can remember some training when I was in sales. And I came away thinking that training was actually for me to manipulate the customers to buy. That's actually what it should have been, in my view, was how do I match that product correctly with that customer? I'm not a salesperson, but I think that, and I know it's a bit cliche, but I'm going back to the PowerPoint, it might look like a jigsaw. You might find something better than that, but if it was a course, that's what my head would be saying. Yeah. You're not trying to manipulate, you're trying to find out as much as you can from the customer so that they get the right TV or they get the right washer, not the one that I get an extra £5 for.
Absolutely. Hallelujah. Thank you very much for that. That's speaking my language 100%, because so many, I suppose, of the negative impressions of that whole wonderful profession of sales come from that kind of self-interested approach, which is more about their own commission check than it is about, you know, actually delivering on customers' outcomes. I mean, we're talking here about training outcomes, but actually it's the same in sales. It's about delivering what they need, what they actually require from you, and actually recognizing that not every single prospect is going to qualify to be your customer, because not all of them you can deliver their learning, their client outcomes. And so, yeah, no, I love that idea of, are you the missing piece in their jigsaw? If you are, then great, let's have a conversation about how we can join the dots for you. And if you're not, well, that's fine. Go and move on to find somebody where you are the missing piece. And that's it. You know, it's about them, not about you. I love that. Going back to the point you made before, actually, around, you know, there's no opt-out. I really like that point around that, because you're talking about the fact that, you know, for a lot of training, particularly in the B2B space, you've got people who maybe are there because their bosses have told them they've got to be there. So they're kind of sitting there with their arms folded going, go on then, impress me. They're what we call hostages. Other times they're more like what you described, which is the holiday maker, which is great. I've actually got a day off. I mean, I'm supposed to be doing this training, but I've got a day off, really. And the main thing is I'm going to hit the bar tonight, have a few beers, and then tomorrow morning I'm doing the same training with but now with a bad head, and probably taking in just as much as I did the day before, which is not a lot. I mean, looking at that kind of thing, I mean, what would be your advice to businesses if they're looking at putting their staff through some form of training? What would be your advice about sort of how they would even kind of go about scoping that training out? And it's a bit of a wild card question for you, because we didn't plan for this one, but it really tickled my brain a little bit on this one. I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I think if I had a business and I went to a trainer like yourself, I'd expect from you, I'd want you to find out as much about me as you possibly could. You need to know where my business is and what my needs are, rather than, I don't want to come to, I would want to go to somebody and say they have this suite of training. They have this, you've got a menu, and I don't want that menu. I need something else. So me and Pep the Poet, David Anderson, we used to call it McDonald's learning. So it does the job. It does the job, but do you ever come away from McDonald's thinking, wow, that was a great meal. I can't wait to go back. So well, I don't like McDonald's, it might be, but it's just the same. No matter what McDonald's you go in the country, you get the same. So what I want is a bit more Heston Blumenthal's is it Fat Duck his restaurant?
It's the Fat Duck, yes.
I want a bit more of that. I want to tell you how hard I want the egg boiled. I want it to be really bespoke, and I'd expect you to want to do that as well.
No problem. I think that is a fantastic tip. So when it comes to your learning, do you want it to be a Big Mac, or do you want it to be bacon and egg ice cream with exactly the right wine accompanying it? I love that. It's a fantastic kind of little analogy there. Because yes, I am. Yes, it makes me sound terribly posh, doesn't it? But I have actually eaten at the Fat Duck. My God, probably the most expensive meal I've ever paid for, but also one of the most interesting.
And was it memorable?
It was extremely memorable. Whereas I can't remember what Big Macs are like. It's been a long time since I last put one in.
Yeah, and it says, if I said to you, what was your favorite McDonald's in your life?
Well, yes, probably one of the only 2 or 3 that I've ever eaten. Not my thing at all. But there you go. Anyway, that makes me sound terribly snobbish, and probably justifiably so. But there you go.
No.
Not to worry. Anyway, listen, Lee, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, as I knew it would be. I can't believe this, but half an hour is already flying past by.
Crazy.
I did tell you it was going to be quick, didn't I?
I
so yeah, Lee, thank you so much for your time today. If we do this again, would you come back and have another session? Because I think we could go on and on, really. This has been really insightful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm working on, and I'll do a bit of self-publishing here, is I am working on, it's not easy, a webinar on cognitive load, which I think would be really useful for so many people. But once it's done, hopefully by Christmas, because I've been working on it quite a while, I'll try and do it in the new year. I think that'd be really useful.
When you've got it done, and that's a when, not an if, because I'll hold you to it.
Definitely.
You've put it out in the world now, so there's all the people. There's accountability for you now. Would love to see that. So please do copy me in on any posts that you're doing. I will definitely share the hell out of that thing, and I will certainly be in the front row. I want my tickets now. I want to be there. So thank you for that. Lee, how do people get hold of you? How can people get in touch with you?
I mean, the main thing is through LinkedIn, really. That's all my details are on LinkedIn. Phone numbers there, emails there, and yeah, I'd love a little project actually to work with a training provider, just to look at what they do, and not to judge, just to ask some questions, because I think that's the best way of doing it. It's not, I don't want to judge people. I know how hard training is. It's hard. It's a tough job, and sometimes you get a tough audience. But it would be nice just to ask the questions and hopefully help them become even better. So.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about. No, I love that. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we could have talked about so many more things. I was going to mention the forgetting curve, but I forgot to. That's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So many things that we could have talked about, but there we are. Lee, it's been a pleasure. We're going to leave it there, but thank you so much again for that. Until the next live stream that we do, hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Whatever you're doing, do it safely. I've been Matthew Dashby Hughes. Lee's been Lee Pace, and we will see you very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.